So wonderful to have Charlottetown artist Donnalee Downe from the Peake Street Collective and This Town is Small on the show. Her Peake Street gallery openings were always great parties, and we talked about community, what artwork really means, and tending the garden of your own creativity.
Art, I want you. Art, you make it pretty hard not to. And my heart is trying hard here to follow you, but I can't always tell if I ought to.
Donnalee Downe, thank you so much for coming out here.
Oh, thanks. It was a lovely drive. Chance to get out of the big city.
Yeah. Our biggest city. I was wondering if you could tell us what sparked your interest first in making visual art of any kind, if you can remember, and how it evolved from there.
I think there's two kind of answers to that, because I think I was always making my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
I got my mom was a very good. Well, she was a potter and an artist her whole life, and so that was something that, if I think back as a child, I was given like art aprons and art kits, and I still have craft books so it was something that I would have been praised for, and I think when I was really young, probably around 12, I was 100% convinced I'd be a writer. It was what I loved to do more than anything. Write angsty youth fiction. And then I started working, teaching as a public school teacher, and had a relationship and moved back to PEI after studying in British Columbia and Toronto. And then it was sort of like very into the craft sphere. So my partner was a weaver, and we did the craft fairs, and I made jewelry. And so it was, in terms of the trajectory, I remember at one point, because we were living in New Glasgow, Rustico area, and another island artist, Karen Gallant, who I think, looking around here, I think your aesthetic, you probably really like Karen Gallant paintings.
Yeah, I do like Karen Gallant paintings.
Yes. Anyway, she used to weirdly just introduce me as an artist to her friends. And it was the first time I just, like, normally I would correct people, but for some reason when she said it, I believed her. And so I never corrected her. And I kind of feel like that feels like a kind of pivotal point.
Mm-hmm.
So when we were hanging out, it was sort of like a transition. My significant relationship was coming to an end, and I was moving to Charlottetown. And I think when I landed there, that's when I decided, okay, let's be an artist, or make that a priority.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I think at that point I knew for my recovering mental health that was going to be important.
Mm-hmm.
But really, it was until 6 years later when a second relationship broke up.
As things go.
Yeah. So that's sort of the point at which I started in photography. Like, these were not things that I was going to sell. I was really enjoying photography. Trying to remember the platform. Flickr was the platform that I was using, and people were following it and really liking it. But honestly, it was about getting out of the house and kind of, I was quite distraught by the breakup of the second relationship.
Art is therapy.
Exactly. It was somehow as if I traveled around my haunts and re-photographed them, I gave them a new context. And so I robbed them of their power to make me feel sad and alone. And then also around that time, my practice developed alongside the organization that I work for called Peake Street, which is a collective of artists that you'd be really familiar with from back in the day. So originally that started, exhibitions were in my home in a barn kind of attached to a space that should not work as a gallery, but somehow did because people were disenfranchised and didn't have a place to exhibit at that point. So this is 20 years ago. So yeah, and that was the point at which I was still working, but doing my best to produce work, but primarily through exhibiting with Peake Street, which has it's a low barrier exhibition opportunity. We don't jury shows. So yeah. And then on the heels of
the
that,
only way that I could get my splatter paintings that I did in 2006.
Also, you remember.
Somewhere.
Oh, you remember. Wonderful. Yeah. Yeah, I remember. Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it definitely, and when I think about those times, I think about you being definitely like a community builder, and finding ways to bring artists together, to support and even to push people to create in new ways with the theme kind of exhibitions and that sort of thing. And certainly, probably this comes from your kind of crafty kind of background, but in your own work, you seem to like to kind of push boundaries of what a more conventional like paint on canvas art form should be. Why do you think community is important when it comes to making art and artists expanding their boundaries?
Right. I think it kind of for me it kind of ties in with this idea that recently, I was getting my hair cut this week, and my wonderful hairdresser said, "So are you making any work?" And I always have trouble answering that question because I feel like I'm always making work. Even when I'm not, I trust that process of how ideas are sifting through my head. I make work with collections, so I'm tidying up and getting rid of things and moving things. And so, I have a practice where cleaning my house counts as making art.
Yep.
But a big part of that is the community. So, for example, last year, I started experimenting just with hanging out with artists a little bit more. So, and for me, that's a big deal because left to my own devices, I would just, slowly melt into the floor of my own home and people might find me.
This is why you're here right now, actually.
Yeah, well, this is I think I said, no, I'm going to be brave. I'm going to go out in my car in the morning. Yeah. So, yeah, I would spend time alone quite happily if left to my own devices. But I also know that it's happy in the moment, but it's not what I need. I need a balance of, alone in public where I might have, alone in my yard where I might have a conversation with a neighbor, incidentally, where I can retreat if I'm overwhelmed to my, to my safe place. But yeah, so I have been a big part of it for me was this town is small now having a physical space that you can go to. So being able to go to the gallery or Peake Street kind of is working on a little space within that, kind of like a little space that people might be able to use for little projects and stuff. So I'll just go in and break down boxboard that's accumulated there and talk to people. And also, since I've retired, I've had more time to do Peake Street's kind of mentorship more formally. So doing things like I'll work with a cohort of 4 artists who want. My favorite thing to do is just work with emerging, established artists who are maybe making a change in their career or want to just kind of push their work in a new direction for 12 months. It's just I don't have any special skills other than I'm pretty good at listening and I know what I've done to push my own work. So, and I'm old, like I said, so I'm
tried it all.
Sage. But yeah, I think I have discovered that talking to artists about art can be just as invigorating as spending a whole lot of time like researching something. Or I think
Yeah.
it is a really big part of how you keep going.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes the fact that we don't, it would be easy to say to my hairstylist that, I guess you call it, what is the name? When I say hairstylist, I feel like he'd be looking at my hair and going, oh gosh, does she really?
That's
Does she
style.
think? But the fellow who cuts my hair, when he said, are you making anything? It would have been very easy to say, oh God, no, I'm not doing anything. But that's not really the truth, so. And I think if you frame it that way for yourself, you will make more.
Yeah. Well, definitely, on this podcast, we've been talking about how art is, yes, it's creating something from nothing in some sort of artistic medium, but it's also thinking creatively about other things in your life. It's like, how are you decorating your house? Like my baking this morning where I didn't use a recipe. Like, that's why I don't use
Amazing.
recipes. I'm just
How do you do it?
I just want to throw things in and see what happens. I'm making something from nothing. Like it's all artwork, really.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's cleaning out the area of your house that you use to make paintings or build things or whatever.
Yep.
I find that question really funny too, because I get that quite a bit as somebody that hasn't been in the public eye much in a while. Someone just asked me the other day at a family gathering, are you still doing the music? I get that question so often. And it's a hard one to answer because the answer is yes, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always making music. I'm always writing. I'm always playing. But I'm not performing and I'm not making records and I'm not, hobnobbing in the business world of that, in the music industry. So it's a yes, but it's, do you mean, am I a professional, working musician right now? No.
Mm-hmm.
So, but what's the difference? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we'd all be maybe a little bit happier if it counted to show up.
Yeah.
Like I often say that, and I'll do that. I'm notorious for making little, I buy a lot of silver and gold stars at Staples,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll set up some little goal for me for the week. I usually get bored with it after a week, and then I just end up with these pieces of paper with gold stars on them. But, for studio stuff, and I don't, right now I've gone from having a physical space that's a studio. Initially, I just had areas in my home that I could work in that
Mm-hmm.
would easily transition, like the dining table can become, and then I had a dedicated studio, and now I'm back to the other arrangement. But even just what that's meant is that a spare room now houses a lot of materials. So I count that. If I go up there and just sit and sharpen pencil crayons for half an hour every morning, that counts because I'm thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think that if you think about like writing or making music or it's that there's sort of like the times that you work on it, but then there's also the times that you're not working on it, but it's percolating,
Yeah, and you're not even realizing it.
Yeah. So I really worried. I don't know what your status is or was for this, but when I quit smoking, which I quit smoking in November of 2023. It's like I just celebrated a year in November. So it'll be 2 years this November. And I worried because so many solutions came to me while I'm having a cigarette.
Yeah, I smoked just a little bit back in the day and haven't for probably 15 years, but I can see how that would be.
Mm-hmm.
Because for me, like driving and smoking, I did a lot of good thinking.
Right.
A lot of inspiration would come from that.
Yeah.
It was probably the driving bit. It wasn't probably necessarily the smoking, but for me, it's wine.
Oh, oh, do tell.
Let's talk about wine. I've gone through bits where I just didn't drink anything at all, but I really love having a bottle of wine around and having a glass of wine while I'm sitting just strumming my guitar. That's one of my
Right.
favorite ways to kind of open up to the muse or muses a little bit.
As long as you got something.
Yeah. Yeah, but also, I can just sit down at the piano and pretty much any time and come up with something. Is there one thing that you keep trying to express through your artwork? An emotion or a story? Or is it a million different things and it depends on the day?
Oh, yeah, there is one thing. And I think it's a hard thing to describe, but I'll do my best. I like the physical sensation of learning, like that palpable feeling of learning.
Mm.
I think that's kind of like it's a kernel. That's the kernel. And I'll kind of try to describe it. There's a couple of ways. I once, I was in the UK in a couple of months ago. I went back. It was I was staying in London with people that I went to school with 40 years ago. 40.
Wow.
And also with people when I did my master's in fine art in Cardiff. And so I was going back to Cardiff as well. I stayed with friends there. And I had not seen those people in 13 years.
Mm.
So anyway, we ended up, one of the artists in Cardiff, we ended up talking about this experience. And it ended up that he's a printmaker. And he and I were very close when we were doing our masters. And we kind of discovered that we were kind of both working on this same kind of kernel.
Mm.
And basically, if I think back to when I was living in Cardiff, I was living in a church that had studio space that you weren't meant to live there. But I convinced the guy that I was doing performance art that involved a bed. So I had a bed there. So anyway, so we were gathering to, make supper together, 3 or 4 of us. And we were across the street when one of the friends arrived. And he was texting me on a Nokia flip phone saying, "I'm here, but I can't find the entrance." And I said, "Where are you?" And he told me where he was. He was in front of the church, and I was across the street and could see the front of the church, but not as far over, obviously, as he was there because he wasn't there. But there was someone there. And I texted on my Nokia flip phone, "Do you see the man with the shopping bag?" And he texted back, "I am the man with the shopping bag." So in that moment, you kind of have this, it's a physical sensation of perceiving something as one thing and then coming to find out that it's something else. And there's that's the sweet spot that I like, that I have to varying degrees, I think, been successful in people having that experience. So I kind of, it's funny, early on, someone used the word clever to describe my work, and I was kind of like pissed off, because it felt like a parlor trick. But I kind of feel like that might be right, that it's kind of like, I think when I think about the pieces or installations or performances that I consider to be most successful, they're where the viewer is a participant who has that experience to some degree of finding out you're wrong, or of putting pieces together that make a different narrative than maybe you thought. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. And actually what I'm thinking of is, okay, for example, I lived out in the Rockies, and so from time to time I'll be looking out the window and I'll see the clouds, that look like mountains. And my brain will say, "Oh, look, you live in the mountains again." And for a second, I can just enjoy that I am back in the mountains again, and those are mountains.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's the same sort of thing where your brain is like thinking that's the thing, but then there's a flip there, and then you recognize that it's something completely different, or it's not what you thought.
Yeah, 100%. I think and basically what we're talking about is the limits of our perception to give us a picture we can rely on. I think it's really exciting to kind of discover that we can't rely on our perception, because then you can play with it. You can, and
Totally.
if you think about sort of like traditional people looking at paintings and, maybe that experience of what it would have been like to walk up close to an Impressionist painting and discover, wow, that's really 6 feet back. That's not what I thought it was,
Totally. Yeah.
I don't make work like that, although it's kind of, it has happened that I've ended up making things you can actually put on your wall. I'm not pigeonholed into a particular way of making work or a particular thing that I make.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that that's at the heart of it. And I actually recently I discovered I really like I subscribe to The Atlantic, and they have a new game. It's called Brackets. I love it.
Okay.
I can't get enough of it. It's like this a whole bunch. It's like a section of text, and it's a whole bunch of brackets within brackets within brackets, and then it'll highlight a couple, and you have to solve. And they're very straightforward. They're not particularly difficult, and you try to get it as fast as you can, and then eventually it reveals this day in history. This happened this day in history. That, I think there's a reason why we like logic. Getting back to like, what is that feeling? Like when you're looking out at clouds that are not mountains, but you're letting yourself play a game where you perceive them as mountains, and 100% they look exactly like mountains. You're playing with that, solving the puzzle. That is perception, I think.
Yeah.
And I think people, I wonder if the palpability of learning, the way I'm describing it, is at the heart of all aesthetics. Maybe. Because I'm just that amazing. That I could solve all of, the history of aesthetics throughout time.
Yeah.
Pretty much nailed it.
We solved it. You're welcome, everybody.
I guess we're done here.
But I do think you're right, though, and that's one thing that I love about different art forms in lots of different ways is the way that it can just change your mind about something, or change your perception of something, or and for me, there's a lot of kind of freedom in the knowledge that I can look at clouds that I know are clouds, but also feel like they are mountains. It's just something. It's like there's no limits then to what we can experience, really. Like we're not closed into this like narrow perception, or maybe non-artists are, but so yeah, so there's really no limits to what we can kind of experience.
Yeah. It's I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting what you said there, just as an aside of, are we preaching to the converted? Because I honestly, like, if you think about what it means to be wrong, like when you're, sitting with, seeing the clouds, knowing they're not mountains, accepting that they're mountains, feeling that they're mountains, knowing in some part of your body that they're mountains, but also at the same time that they're not. Like, that's about playing with this idea that we can be wrong about things. And I think in particularly this political climate and all the things we have to be looking at, if people understood that, we'd be in a lot better place.
Absolutely.
But I do sometimes worry that, yeah. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure we can solve that one.
No, I don't. I think that's too big for us
Yeah.
today. But I'm kind of curious about how, like you taught art in school, right? For quite a
Well,
while.
actually, yeah, that's sort of like another. I feel like I did, but only a few cohorts. Like I
Gotcha.
didn't teach art. I did teach art in high school, but not, I think, as much as people think maybe that I did.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, sorry, I cut you off.
Well,
You can ask me questions
you
about
probably.
teaching art in high school. It's not like you're not allowed.
Well, I'm just thinking about that kind of ability of artists to see, to be able to know that being wrong is okay, and it's just a different way of looking at things.
Mhm.
Do you think that you, like through teaching art to high school students, do you think that you made any impression on people at that age to just understand that, and how thinking creatively can be helpful in many other ways in their
Um,
lifetimes?
I sort of feel like, nah, I did a shit's job.
That's valid.
I honestly, actually, I would say no, because I think that wasn't. I kind of thought of it as in a different way, and maybe it's in part the curriculums, and it's in part, uh, either you'll have, like, a curriculum that's, like, way too much to get done, or you'll have one that's so narrow that you're really just providing opportunities for people to try different media,
Right.
and that was sort of, what I tried to do. Well, actually, I think there was one thing that I did that might have been geared toward that, and I think if people enjoyed this thing that I used to do, they might have understood that, or that's what I was hoping. And basically that was, I would say that what I was doing, so I was doing grade 10, so it's like your introductions. So we did like some printmaking, just some watercolor, some acrylic, like primarily some fairly straightforward media, sculpture, that kind of thing. Color theory, the tools, the
Building
basics,
blocks.
that
Yeah.
the building blocks. But then what we also would do was, we'd kind of jury together. We would put everything that was produced in a particular unit up, and we'd say, okay, our exhibition space is this display case down by the office, or this bulletin board here. And I think in that, maybe they got a lesson in how difficult it is to jury,
Mm-hmm.
um, and how sometimes it's not the best work that ends up in an exhibition.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's something that would go with that.
Yeah.
Or, when you get older, it's going to be underrepresented groups, groups that have traditionally not been represented. We're going to want those people's voices there. So I think there was sort of like, that would be as close to anything that has to do with really making art, that I
Yeah.
could have imparted to them. But like I said, I kind of, um, I sort of feel like, I didn't do it really enough to feel like I think sort of my work with Peake Street would have been more how I feel that I've kind of helped people maybe understand that part of what art making is.
Mm-hmm. What role does inspiration play in your work? Do you find it in everyday life, or do you have specific sources that consistently fuel your creativity?
Um, um, I, I think collections are kind of, I make work with collections, and I collect things over long periods of time. Um, And so I kind of like the maintenance of those. I'm sort of interested in like where we believe that. I think this is why always find it interesting to go into people's houses. Like the minute you walked away, I was like, okay, well, what are these all the books that you're reading right here? And this, like, look how people organize things. And I'm interested in the decisions we make about where things belong over time. So that's kind of always, I describe that as I call it, actually, Sandy Hartling came up with this description or title, Project for Past and Projected Projects. Because it's just so hilarious because it's just so stupid and awesome. But that's kind of what I do. So if once I've got all my pencil crayons sharpened, one thing I can always do is pull, I house a lot of collections in like cases, particularly like remnants of exhibitions or installations, and I'll pull it down and I have an itemized list, and then I'll read through the list or look at the objects in the box or wherever it is. A lot of stuff's in banker boxes and under my bed and so on. But and I'll sort of just be asking myself, not even asking myself, just kind of like what, like it happened not too long ago that a collection, trying to remember, I think I have a collection called Lost, Found, and Stolen.
That sounds familiar.
And I think I discovered that within that, maybe it was the found, I'd categorized a number of things that were gifts from other artists. So I pulled all those things, and then I realized, okay, on the floor, which I describe as my living space, my regular house, I also had 3 or 4, pull those all together, make a new list, gift of the artist, becomes the new collection. And then eventually, like sometimes I'll make physical work. Like I had a collection called Archive of Loss, which had a lot of paperwork, which eventually got pulled, and it was difficult documents. And then, so the difficult documents, I remember, had all the horrible emails sent back and forth between when my first major relationship broke up. And then it also had psychiatric reports. So there's been a few times in my history as a teacher that I wasn't able to work. So would have been seeing psychiatrists. And then I think at one time, Sun Life, well, they're not covering me now, so who cares? But they cut me off at one point. And my psychiatrist wrote a lot of letters describing the situation and that kind of thing. So those letters then became, I did a collection of tapestries called Get Well Soon. And that was like my first solo show. And that was all of the words, it was text-based, and all of the words were from those psychiatric reports. So, difficulty coping, so I did these sort of pastoral, they were vintage, the kinds of cross-stitch that you would find at Value Village, and then worked out a way to, once you found one that you could actually work with, they had to be quite well done in order for me to then do the lettering layout for my own text. So there's an example again where, the thing that keeps me going tends to be the things that have accumulated in my home, whether it's that's where the inspiration comes from. And then I guess the other is the ongoing realizations in a life lived, which is so now I'm sort of thinking about, I think what's next would be, I've been thinking a lot. I'll be 62 in February. So I've been thinking a lot about my invisibility, this sort of like melting away into your surroundings. I think that, and then thinking about that in terms of objects, I've been joking with people that I've been Swedish death cleaning my entire life. So just, like where do these things go? This accumulation of stories that are inherent in the things that we keep.
Right.
So, yeah, I kind of see that feels like a very natural next step for me to kind of think about, I'm not sure what it will be, but I think it might be an archive of who gets what.
Yeah.
Yeah. The way you've kind of curated the space that we're in, it's funny because somebody said to me recently, I love your minimalist aesthetic. Well, like I was like, minimalist? Are you kidding me? But I think they were sort of seeing what I'm seeing here, where you can actually see the things that you do like. Like you're not, you have a lot of plants, but which I'm kind of astounded they're so alive. I don't.
I water them regularly.
Is that what you do?
Yeah.
It's something. Oh man,
Semi-regularly.
there's like I don't see a brown leaf. I actually just stopped. I have one house plant and I rescued it. Again, it's like this thing, like other people's garbage that I have a problem with. So one of the plants that I do have in my house is a mango that I had gone out. It was my mom and my stepdad. And I think my stepdad, Morley, had found this mango pit after the winter in the compost pit and it had a great big, it started to grow. And so he had grown this tree, but like they just didn't have room for it. And they were probably my age, come to think of it now. And they're like, oh, just compost it. Like we can't have this plant. The house was closing in on them with so many plants. So I have that. That's the only plant that I really try to winter over. But as soon as I can get it out of the house in the summertime, that's what happens.
And yet your backyard is I have always envied for its gardens. So it's not like you don't have a green thumb.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's another place where I'm sharpening Laurentian pencils, like it's or having a cigarette. It's like the getting out in the yard and digging up and making decisions about next year's garden while you're still gardening.
Yep.
But yeah, but talking about, and then actually, no, there's another, the composer who wrote about, you might know this, gardening versus architecture.
Oh.
So this idea that, and we talked about this before we started recording, and you might be able to help me remember what it was in relation to, but I think basically the thing that you're interested in with these podcasts is sort of like, how is it that some of us become interested in a lifetime of making work? What are we getting out of that? How are we approaching it so it's sustainable? And I think the gardening versus architecture, which I'll look up and you can have in a link associated with this podcast, where the idea originated. But basically, are you making work because you're tending the garden of your practice? Or are you making work because you're an architecture and you sit down and you say, okay, this is what it's going to be. And then you break it down into little steps. And I think for me, it's gardening. And then when it comes together and I know what I'm going to do, then it's just the architecture of that. And Rilla Marshall, who's another artist on the island, she used to say, generally she'd be talking me down off a cliff, making art is 90% contemplation and 10% execution. So when you're starting to panic because you have secured an exhibition for 2 months from now and you don't know what the hell you're doing, remember that you have to do the 90% of gardening and contemplation. For me, it's gardening.
Yep.
And then executing it is usually quite fast unless you decide you're going to do, 22 cross stitch pieces.
Or 12-foot by 12-foot oil paintings or something.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And I kind of tend to make it big on both ends, but that's just me.
One thing I like to end these podcasts often with, like, how can people support you? Where can people find your work? It seems to me that the Peake Street Gallery right now is what has been going on for you, besides all of the other work that you're doing. But
Yeah. So we now operate under the umbrella of This Town is Small, and we do exhibitions, usually one a year at this point. And we will probably do one coming up soon now that This Town is Small has an exhibition space in the Hilda Woolnough Gallery at the Guild. That's really helpful to us. As far as my work, it's funny, my work, I don't I want to say I don't sell my work. Mainly what I want to say is most of what I make you can't put on your wall. So I do a lot of sort of like performance work, and times that I have done things that can hang on your wall. People like, oh, she's making something you can put on your wall, so they buy them.
Yeah.
So I don't. But yeah, but it is interesting. I've been thinking about, I thought it might be fun I do have quite a bit of work and I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do with it because it's all over the place. It's like studio tests and that kind of, I thought it would be fun to finish up and sell, do a lottery and just if your first pick, you might get a nice piece. And if your last pick, you'd be like, oh God, what am I going to do with this? Yeah, mural made out of empty cigarette packages. That's 8 feet long and 7 feet wide. What am I going to do with that? Anyway, but so if people want to support Peake Street, actually following This Town is Small on Instagram is probably the best way to hear about those calls for sure. Yeah. Or reach out to me and or just This Town is Small. You can just email them, find out. You can get on our mailing list. We have a supporters mailing list, and people like you who have exhibited even once become a lifetime member. No cost. Cheap as free.
I'm not sure I realized. Yes, I think I did realize that was the case.
Yeah, you're stuck with us until people eventually will say, I don't live in this country anymore. Can you stop sending me calls for submissions? Please?
I love seeing those come into my inbox.
Well, look forward to your participation in the next one.
We will see.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
I wondered what would be the worth of my words in the world. If I write them and then recite them, are they worth being heard? Just because I like them, does that mean that I should mic them and see what might unfurl? And I think of the significance of my opinions here. Is it significant to be giving them? Does anybody care? Just because I'm into this, does that mean that I should live like it? And really, do I dare? My art in this life. If I make it, will someone take it and think that it's genuine? Would they be glad that I did, cause they got something good out of it? Would they leave me and be any more inspired? And I question the outcome of the outpouring of myself. If I tell everyone my stories, would this keep me healthy and well? Would it give me purpose and to this world some sort of service? Is it worth it? How could I tell? And my heart is trying hard here to follow you, but I can't always tell if I